Here's a crafted speech with 6 key points under the title, The Algorithmic Leader. It's written in the forward, looking thought-provoking and practical style you'd expect from Mike Walsh, but without mentioning him directly. In the past, leadership was often associated with a certain mystique, a sense that great leaders had an intuitive gift, the ability to make bold decisions in moments of uncertainty, to trust their gut when logic seemed insufficient. That narrative shaped much of how we viewed authority, the leader as the lone visionary, able to read the winds of change and navigate through storms with instinct alone. But in the age we are entering, that notion has become dangerously outdated. The complexity of the world we now face, the sheer volume of information, and the velocity of change mean that relying purely on intuition is no longer enough. Today, intuition must be sharpened by insight, and that insight increasingly comes from the algorithms and intelligence systems that surround us. Consider how decisions are made in modern organizations. We are no longer talking about quarterly reports or static market analysis. We are dealing with real-time data flows, dynamic consumer behavior, global disruptions, and shifting patterns that change by the minute. No human, no matter how experienced, can process that complexity at scale. Yet, this is exactly where the opportunity lies. Leaders don't need to compete with machines in terms of memory, speed, or pattern recognition. They must instead learn how to partner with machines. The real question is not whether technology can think, but whether we can learn to ask it the right questions. The leaders who succeed will be those who know how to frame problems, design better questions, and interpret algorithmic insights into meaningful actions. This requires a fundamental shift in mindset. Too often, leaders cling to their past successes, relying on the same instincts that once brought them recognition. But instincts formed in one era can become blind spots in another. The challenge is not to abandon intuition altogether. It still matters, especially when decisions touch on human values or emotional resonance, but rather to augment it with data-driven clarity. Imagine a pilot who refuses to look at the instruments because they trust their feel for the aircraft. That may work in clear skies, but in turbulence, darkness, or unfamiliar territory, ignoring the dashboard could be fatal. The same is true of leadership. Today, the dashboard is data, and to ignore it is to risk irrelevance. Yet, there is a deeper truth here. Working with algorithms is not just about accessing more information. It is about redefining the very role of the leader. Leaders must become translators between human vision and machine logic. They must take the raw output of data models, predictions, and simulations and weave them into strategies that inspire people. Algorithms may reveal correlations and probabilities, but they do not explain meaning. It falls to leaders to provide that narrative, to ensure that insight becomes action in a way that serves the organization's purpose and the society it impacts. Ultimately, leadership in the algorithmic age is not about surrendering to machines or resisting them. It is about recognizing that the future demands a new balanced intuition guided by insight, human judgment sharpened by machine intelligence, and decision-making that acknowledges the complexity of the world while finding clarity within it. The leaders who master this balance will not only navigate disruption, they will shape the future itself. When we think about organizations of the past, what often comes to mind are rigid hierarchies, predictable structures, and well-defined processes that promise stability. For a long time, this worked. Companies operated in relatively stable environments where success depended on efficiency, consistency, and control. But today, that model is crumbling under the weight of rapid technological disruption, shifting consumer expectations, and an interconnected global economy where change is the only constant. In this new landscape, adaptability is not just a competitive advantage, it is a survival skill. And adaptability does not happen by accident. It is cultivated deliberately through culture. Leaders must understand that the real currency of the future is not control, but the ability to create an environment where people are willing and able to change. Adaptability begins with mindset. In too many organizations, the instinct, when faced with disruption, is to protect the status quo. People cling to the familiar because change is uncomfortable. Yet the most successful leaders cultivate cultures where change is not feared but expected, where disruption is not seen as a threat but as an invitation to grow. That requires breaking old habits of thinking and encouraging teams to embrace uncertainty as part of their daily reality. Leaders who create this kind of environment understand that adaptability starts with psychological safety. When people feel safe to experiment, to test ideas, and even to fail without fear of punishment, they become far more willing to innovate and respond quickly to new challenges. The role of culture becomes even more critical when technology is involved. Algorithms can predict consumer behavior, optimize supply chains, and identify patterns in vast data sets, but they cannot implement change on their own. Machines may highlight opportunities, but it is human beings who must act on them. And here lies the paradox. The more advanced our tools become, the more vital human adaptability is. A workforce that resists change will neutralize even the most powerful technologies, while a culture that embraces it will magnify innovation exponentially. That is why the most transformative leaders do not just invest in systems and software, they invest in mindsets, in learning, and in creating conditions where adaptability is the default response. Adaptability also requires speed. In a world where markets shift overnight and new competitors emerge from unexpected directions, slow-moving organizations are at a permanent disadvantage. The challenge for leaders is to design decision-making processes that allow teams to move quickly without losing alignment. This does not mean abandoning structure altogether. It means building structures that are flexible, fluid, and responsive. Teams must be empowered to act autonomously, guided by clear principles rather than paralyzed by endless approvals. The leader's role is not to dictate every move, but to provide a framework within which quick, informed action can be taken confidently at all levels of the organization. Ultimately, building a culture of adaptability is not about reacting faster to change. It is about anticipating it. The best leaders create organizations that do not merely respond to disruption, but actively seek it out as a source of opportunity. They encourage curiosity, foster resilience, and remind people that the future will not be shaped by those who avoid change, but by those who run toward it with energy and imagination. In this way, adaptability becomes more than a response to uncertainty. It becomes the defining characteristic of leadership in a world where change is the only constant. Technology has always been a double-edged sword. It gives us the power to solve extraordinary problems, but it also raises new and complex dilemmas about what is right, fair, and just. As we step further into a world shaped by algorithms and artificial intelligence, the question is no longer whether machines can make decisions, but whether those decisions reflect the values we want to live by. Efficiency is not the same as morality. A recommendation system may optimize for profit, but in doing so, it might reinforce harmful stereotypes or deepen social divisions. A predictive model may anticipate risk, but it may also inherit the biases of the data it was trained on. This is why ethical intelligence has become one of the most important leadership qualities of our time. Ethical intelligence is not simply about following laws or complying with regulations. Those are the minimum standards. True ethical leadership demands a proactive approach, anticipating the unintended consequences of technology, questioning the assumptions embedded in algorithms, and ensuring that innovation is aligned with human dignity. It requires leaders to look beyond quarterly results and consider the broader impact of their decisions on society, on individuals, and on the generations that will come after us. Leaders who fail to do this may achieve short-term gains, but they will ultimately erode trust, and without trust, no organization can thrive in the long term. The challenge is that algorithms are often opaque, even to the people who build them. Machine learning models can generate predictions that are mathematically sound but difficult to explain. This lack of transparency creates a leadership dilemma. How do you hold systems accountable when you cannot fully understand how they reach their conclusions? The answer lies in embedding ethical frameworks into the design and deployment of technology from the very beginning. Leaders must ask difficult questions. Who benefits from this system? Who might be harmed? What biases might be amplified? How can accountability be built in at every stage? These questions are not technical in nature. They are moral, cultural, and human. It is also vital to remember that ethical intelligence is not a solitary pursuit. No single leader can foresee every ethical risk, and no organization should bear that responsibility alone. Ethical intelligence must be distributed across the culture of the company with diverse voices included in decision-making. By inviting perspectives from people with different experiences, backgrounds, and worldviews, leaders can identify blind spots and design solutions that are more equitable and inclusive. This diversity of thought is not only a moral imperative, but also a source of strength in creating technologies that truly serve humanity. At its core, ethical leadership in the algorithmic age is about refusing to abdicate responsibility to machines. Technology can tell us what is possible, but it cannot tell us what is right. That responsibility remains firmly with us. The leaders who will define the future are not those who exploit technology without question, but those who ensure it is used to elevate, to empower, and to protect. They will be remembered not just for the systems they built, but for the humanity they preserved. There is a paradox at the heart of our technological age. The more advanced our machines become, the more valuable our human qualities become. As algorithms take over repetitive, mechanical, and analytical tasks, the space for human creativity, imagination, and empathy grows larger, not smaller. Too often, people fear that technology will replace them, but the truth is more nuanced. Machines are brilliant at processing vast amounts of data, identifying patterns, and executing tasks with flawless efficiency, but they cannot dream, they cannot tell stories, and they cannot connect with people on a deeply emotional level. Leadership in this new era demands an understanding of how to harness machines for what they do best, while freeing humans to focus on what only they can do. Empowering human potential begins with rethinking the design of work itself. For generations, workplaces were built on the industrial models, efficiency, repetition, and predictability. People were treated like cogs in a larger machine, their value measured by output and compliance. But in the algorithmic age, that model no longer makes sense. When algorithms can perform routine tasks faster and cheaper than any human, the question shifts: what is the unique value that people bring to the table? The answer lies in creativity, problem solving, empathy, and the ability to connect disparate ideas into something new. Leaders must restructure work environments so that people spend less time on what machines can do and more time on the work that sparks imagination and innovation. This shift is not only about productivity, it is also about fulfillment. Human beings are wired for meaning, not monotony. When work becomes nothing more than repetition, people disengage, morale declines, and innovation stalls. But when work taps into human potential, the urge to create, to explore, to contribute ideas that matter, individuals feel more alive and more invested in their organization's mission. Leaders who understand this create workplaces where people are not just employees, but explorers of possibility. They remove unnecessary bureaucracies, encourage cross-disciplinary collaboration, and give people the autonomy to experiment with ideas without fear of failure. Empowering human potential also means recognizing the importance of emotional intelligence. In a world where algorithms guide decisions, what becomes increasingly important is the human ability to interpret context, to understand nuance, and to build trust through relationships. Machines can optimize logistics or forecast consumer behavior, but they cannot sit across the table from a client and truly listen to their fears, hopes, and motivations. They cannot build the sense of belonging and purpose that keeps teams aligned during times of uncertainty. Leaders must therefore elevate empathy, communication, and emotional connection as essential skills in the future of work. Ultimately, empowering human potential is about reframing technology not as a competitor, but as a collaborator. The goal is not to replace people, but to amplify them, to give them tools that extend their reach and magnify their imagination. The leaders who succeed will be those who design systems where machines handle the mundane so that humans can focus on the meaningful. In doing so, they will unlock a new era of innovation, where the power of technology is not measured by what it can automate, but by how it helps humanity flourish. We are living in a time where the pace of change is no longer linear but exponential. Markets shift in days, consumer expectations evolve overnight, and global disruptions ripple across industries at speeds that leave little room for hesitation. In this environment, the ability to make decisions at the speed of data is not just an advantage. It is a necessity. Yet speed does not mean recklessness. And agility does not mean abandoning vision. True leadership in the algorithmic age is about designing decision-making frameworks that allow organizations to act quickly while still being anchored to long-term purpose. The first challenge is recognizing that human decision-making alone cannot keep up with the velocity of modern change. By the time a leader has reviewed reports, convened committees, and debated options, the landscape may already have shifted. This is where augmented intelligence becomes essential. Algorithms can analyze streams of data in real time, identify trends before they become obvious, and present scenarios that would take humans weeks or months to detect. Leaders who embrace these tools are able to move faster not because they are rushing, but because they are informed. They can focus their judgment on what matters most, interpreting the insights, weighing trade-offs, and aligning decisions with the organization's values. Speed also requires trust. In traditional organizations, decisions are often centralized, flowing upward through layers of hierarchy before any action is taken. That structure might offer control, but it kills agility. By the time approval is secured, opportunities are lost. To operate at machine speed, leaders must empower teams at every level to act autonomously within clear frameworks. This does not mean chaos, it means clarity. When everyone understands the guiding principles, the mission, and the ethical boundaries, decisions can be made quickly without constant oversight. Trusting people to act with agency is one of the most powerful accelerators of speed. However, moving fast does not mean abandoning foresight. The danger of real-time decision-making is that organizations become reactive, constantly chasing the latest trend or responding to immediate crises without considering the bigger picture. The most effective leaders balance speed with strategy. They design processes where short-term decisions are continuously aligned with long-term vision. They understand that algorithms may predict patterns, but only humans can define purpose. Without that balance, speed can quickly devolve into short-sightedness. Another critical aspect of decision-making at machine speed is resilience. Not every rapid decision will be perfect, and not every insight generated by data will be accurate. Leaders must create cultures where mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn rather than failures to punish. This iterative approach, deciding, testing, learning, and adjusting, is what allows organizations to evolve dynamically in a fast-changing world. Speed, in this sense, is not about always being right the first time. It is about being willing to adapt faster than the competition. Ultimately, the leaders who master decision-making at machine speed will redefine what agility means in the digital era. They will not simply react faster than others. They will create systems that anticipate change, empower people, and translate data into action with clarity and confidence. In a world where time itself has become a competitive edge, leadership is not about slowing down the storm. It is about learning to move with it. The essence of leadership is undergoing a profound transformation. For centuries, leadership was defined by authority, hierarchy, and control. Leaders were the ones who set the rules, commanded resources, and held power over decisions. But in the age of algorithms and intelligent systems, this model is becoming obsolete. The complexity of today's world cannot be managed by command and control structures, nor can it be led by individuals who rely solely on positional authority. The future of leadership will belong to those who can orchestrate, rather than dictate, leaders who see themselves not as rulers at the top of a pyramid, but as connectors within a network of people and machines working together towards shared outcomes. Reimagining leadership in this way requires us to abandon the illusion of certainty. In traditional models, leaders were expected to know the answers, to project confidence even in the face of uncertainty. But the reality is that in a world driven by data and algorithms, no single individual can possibly hold all the knowledge required to navigate complexity. The role of the leader is not to know everything, but to create systems where knowledge flows freely, insights are drawn from diverse sources, and collective intelligence can be harnessed. Leadership becomes less about directing and more about enabling, less about giving orders, and more about designing environments where the right answers emerge through collaboration between humans and technology. This new form of leadership is also deeply relational. Algorithms may handle processes, automate decisions, and surface predictions, but they cannot inspire, motivate, or instill meaning. people still look to leaders for vision and purpose, for the stories that make sense of change and the values that guide action. In reimagining leadership, we must recognize that vision cannot be outsourced to machines. It is the leader's task to articulate why the work matters, how it contributes to something larger, and what kind of future it is building. Without this sense of meaning, even the most efficient organizations will struggle with disengagement and stagnation. Another critical dimension of reimagined leadership is humility. In a hyper-connected world, leaders must be willing to admit what they don't know, to listen to insights from data, and to learn from voices across the organization. Arrogance and rigidity are liabilities in an environment that demands adaptability and continuous learning. Humility, far from being a weakness, becomes a strength, a recognition that leadership is shared, distributed, and evolving. The best leaders will be those who understand how to step back from control and step into connection, amplifying the intelligence of both people and machines. Ultimately, reimagining leadership is about recognizing that the future cannot be led by power alone, but by perspective. The leader of tomorrow is not the loudest voice in the room, nor the one with the grandest title, but the one who can weave together human creativity and machine intelligence into a coherent whole. They will be architects of systems where algorithms guide, culture empowers, and vision inspires. Leadership in this sense is no longer about being at the center of everything, but about being at the edge of possibility, where people, machines, and ideas converge to create the future.